Hello everyone. For today's topic, we are going to study about the policy guidelines on the provision of educational programs and services for learners with disabilities in the K-12 basic education program. So, these guidelines pertains to to how to conceptualize or what are the things to be considered in developing educational programs and or educational services for the learners with disabilities in the school setting. So how the school administrator, particularly the school principal, school head, uh, would plan or conceptualize educational programs for special education students. This is a lesson under the subject ED 3105, Foundation of Special and Inclusive Education for Bachelor of Elementary Education program. So the objectives for today's lesson is that the BEd students will be able to explain laws and policies as basis in the implementation of education programs and services for persons with disabilities. So these are the guide questions or some pointers on what to expect in the ahead of the presentation or in the presentation to be shown to you later. How persons or learners with disabilities be integrated in schools. So, papaano silang isinasama or inilalagay sa school setting? Are there special provisions for them in education? How this provision is implemented? So, are there any special requirement or special provisions that are intended only for the learners with disabilities or LWDs in the school? Who are the people directly responsible in looking into their situation? Now, who are the accountable people and that monitor the situation of these LWDs? And how to teach persons or learners with disabilities? So first, let us discuss this new DepEd order recently issued by the Department of Education on November 2, 2021. This is the DepEd Order number 44, series of 2021, and entitled Policy Guidelines on the Provision of Educational Programs and Services for Learners with Disabilities in the K-12 Basic Education program. So the first article states the title of this DepEd order and some legal basis on which this policy guidelines is being anchored. So the Department of Education issues the policy guidelines on the provision of educational programs and services for learners with disabilities in the K-12 basic education program. This is pursuant to Section 3 of Republic Act number 10533, known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, and Section 8 and 8.2 from its implementing rules and regulation. I provided here a copy of Section 8 and 8.2 of the implementing rules and regulation of RA 10533. It states that Section 8 is about inclusiveness of enhanced basic education. In furtherance of Section 3 of the Act, inclusiveness of enhanced basic education shall mean the implementation of programs designed to address physical, intellectual, psychosocial, and cultural needs of learners which shall include but not limited to the following. The 8.1 is about programs for the gifted and talented. So this shall refer to the comprehensive programs for the gifted and talented learners in all levels of basic education. And the 8.2 is about programs for learners with disabilities. This shall refer to the comprehensive programs designed for learners with disabilities, which may be home, school, center, or community-based. So we can see from here the emphasis of this implementing rules and regulation is on the inclusiveness, the inclusivity of basic education, which includes the gifted and talented learners, or the exceptional learners, and the learners with disabilities. So programs are educational programs when made in consideration of their exceptionalities shall be guided by this policy according to DO 44 2021. For number 2, the enclosed policy guideline shall provide an overall direction and guidance. So this will be the guidelines of the Department of Education and the national government whenever they will organize, manage, and implement programs and services for learners with disabilities. And this policy may serve as guide for external stakeholders as well in addressing the needs of learners with disabilities. So it means that this department order will serve an overall direction and guidance in the in taking effect or implementation of any educational programs and services for learners with disabilities. And this will be effective from effective school year is from 2021 to 2022. Then this policy shall be implemented in both public and private elementary and secondary schools. However, private schools may contextualize the necessary provisions depending on their needs and context. But the public elementary and secondary school, this policy shall be implemented. Why there is a need to implement this policy about this policy about guidelines in the educational programs and services for learners with disabilities? Let us see the rationale of the department order. In the global scale, the disability of people comprise 15% of world's population. So which means that 15% of the world's population, or over 1 billion of people, has some form of disability. That is according to the World Health Organization in 2011. In the Philippines, there are 15 million out of 100 million Filipino children, youth, and adult with disabilities. So the population of Filipinos in the Philippines is 100 million, and 15 million out of it are people, the children, youth, and adult with disabilities. That is according to World Health Organization in 2011. And 3.3 million out of the 15 million people with disabilities are in schools. That's according to UNICEF in 2016. So imagine the number of people with disability that are not in school. Maybe these are the some adults, some children, and some youth with disabilities. So the picture is taken from the NCDA .gov.ph. So the DepEd, as the government agency that is primarily vested the authority to implement the basic education in the country, there are main strategies or priorities that they should be considered. One is identifying learners with disabilities and providing appropriate and relevant educational intervention to these learners. So, merong dalawang kumbaga ay task na pwede rin nating sabihing estratehiya ang Department of Education um, para dito sa pagpapatuloy or paggawa ng mga programa regarding these learners with disabilities, no? Ang unang estratehiya is they have to identify the learners with disabilities, no? And in identifying, it's not only those who are in school already, but also they need to seek or they need to find and bring the learners with disabilities in school. Okay? And after identifying these learners, then the next strategy is provide them the appropriate and relevant educational intervention. So that could be different from one learner with disability to other learner with disability. It is also emphasized that RA 7277 as amended by RA 100 or 10070 emphasizes the role of the government agencies to uphold the rights of persons with disabilities and their duty, to work hand in hand, all the government agencies, in upholding these rights. And we have also the Magna Carta for persons with disability. This is very impactful in the lives of the persons with disability. Magna Carta for persons with disability has impacted different aspects, no, of how to treat the people with disabilities. So let's see what the Magna Carta for persons with disabilities influence, so how it influence the society or the state and the implementation of the protection for PWDs. So PWDs the acronym PWDs means person with disabilities. Sometimes I am using, in the context of education, I am using the LWDs or learners with disabilities. So the Magna Carta for persons with disability is very strong, for it emphasizes that persons with disabilities are part of the Philippine society. Okay, they emphasize that people with disabilities or persons with disabilities are part of the Philippine society, which means that they have the equal rights as other people. Okay? And therefore, when they have equal rights as other people, they have equal standing in the Philippine society. Another, Magna Carta for persons with disabilities oblige the state to adopt policies considering the needs of the people or persons with disability, ensuring their rehabilitation, self-development, self-reliance, and develop skills and potentials to enable them to compete favorably in available opportunities in the society. And another salient or key aspect, no, why Magna Carta for PWDs is very impactful. Magna Carta makes it the duty of the state to provide PWDs of their rights to access quality education. So, in the total perspective, in the first statement there, it states that PWDs are part of the Philippine society and therefore must practice equal rights with the other people in the society. And that makes sense when an ordinary citizen has the right and access to quality education, and as well the PWDs, if they um, if they are really treated as part of the Philippine society, as well as the consideration of their needs in adopting or making policies, no? So and for their self development in order for them to compete in the available opportunities. So napakalakas ng Magna Carta for persons with disability. It really make the PWD's rights to be protected in the Philippine society. And another is the duty of the state. So the Magna Carta makes it the duty of the state to provide auxiliary services to facilitate learning process for LWDs or learners with disability. Inuutusan din ng Magna Carta ang gobyerno na magbigay ng auxiliary services, which means that if there's a need to provide extra learning process, extra facilities, special requirements for LWDs, then the state must provide them. Okay? And as well, there is a description of the policy that this policy aims to provide an overall direction and guidance in the organization, management, and implementation of appropriate and relevant programs, services, and other educational intervention at the different levels of governance in the department for learners with disabilities, regardless of their gender, race, culture, ethnicity, religion, and economic status. So this is also anchored on the inclusive education policy framework for basic education. And it also provides the overall framework for the implementation of programs that promote inclusive education. So, itong policy na ito ay nagbibigay ng what we call this overall direction. When we say overall direction, maliwanag niyang ipinapakita yung path o yung daan o yung tatahaking procedure, no? Kapag ang isang entity ay nag-organize, nag-manage, nag-implement ng mga programa para sa learners with disabilities. And all learners with disabilities are included. Okay? Not only learners with disability in terms of inclusive education, pati yung mga Muslim learners in madrasa education, the indigenous people's education o yung ating mga ethnic and or IP people, no? Yung ating special education for people with special needs, and of course we also have the alternative learning system. Ito yung mga mag-aaral na ang edad ay hindi na yung school age na tinatawag, ano? And these are some inclusion in the what we call inclusive education policy framework. And this policy guidelines is being implemented as well to them. Okay? Hence, all children and youth with disabilities covered by basic education, including but not limited to Muslim, indigenous people, out-of-school children and youth, children in situations of armed conflict, children in street situation, children in conflict with the law, children in special cases are covered in this policy guidelines. Okay, this policy guidelines is anchored on different laws and commitments pertaining to special education and inclusivity. And accessibility to quality education. Let us look at the different laws and commitments listed here. We have the 1987 Constitution, particularly Article 14, Section 1 and 2. We have Republic Act Number 9155 or Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001 in Section 2 and 6. We have the RA 10533 or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, Section 3 and 5. And we have the implementing rules and regulation of RA 10-0533, Section 8. The Batas Pambansa Bilang 232, Education Act of 1982, Presidential Decree Number 603, the Child and Youth Welfare Code of 1974. We have the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1989, the RA 11510 Alternative Learning System Act, and the Batas Pambansa Bilang 344 Accessibility Law. We also have United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, known as the UNCRPD in 2006. The Sustainable Development Goal Number 4, Ancient Strategy that Make Right Real, and the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health of the World Health Organization in 2002 and 2017. So let's look at each law and or commitment and their description. What is their emphasis and how are they related to the policy guidelines in providing educational programs for learners with disabilities. The 1987 Constitution prescribes the state to protect and promote the rights of all citizens to quality education. This will be found in Article 14. And particularly, there is a statement here that states the system of education must be relevant to the needs of the people and the society. So we can see there that the education system of the country, as mandated by the 1987 Constitution, must be relevant to the needs of the people. Another one is the RA 9155, or the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001. Reiterates the above constitutional mandate. And this vests the DepEd with the authority and accountability and responsibility for ensuring access to, promoting equity, and improving the quality of basic education. So makikita natin, ang RA 9155 ay nagbibigay sa DepEd, sa Department of Education, ng otoridad o ng power, accountability, o sila rin ang may pananagutan at responsibility at may responsibilidad sa pagsigurado na ang mga learners, Filipino learners, ay magkaroon ng access at magkaroon ng pag-i-improve ng kalidad ng edukasyon. So, kaya nakikita natin ang DepEd order na ito ay nanggaling sa Department of Education. In exercising their authority as well as their accountability in order to improve the quality of basic education, as mandated as well by the Constitution, in order to provide a relevant basic education according to the needs of the people. So, the RA number 10533, or the Enhanced Basic Education of 2013, ito na yung K-12, the state is mandated to provide or to create a functional basic education system. Ang purpose nito is to develop productive and responsible citizen that has the essential competencies, the skills, and as well as the values for lifelong learning. Ang focus nito is to make education learner-centered, learner-oriented, inclusive, and developmentally appropriate, as stated in the last sentence. So, the RA 10533 is mandating the state to create a functional basic education system that is learner-centered, inclusive, and developmentally appropriate. Ang implementing rules and regulation naman ng RA 10533 ay nagsasaad na mas magbigay ng emphasis sa inclusiveness of enhanced basic education. This is designed to address the physical, intellectual, psychological, and cultural needs of learners. Kasama na rito yung paggawa ng programs for learners with disabilities. And further, this provides the basic education to meet basic learning needs, encompasses mula sa kindergarten, elementary, secondary, out-of-school learners, and those with special needs. Okay? It also provides that kindergarten, elementary, and secondary education are compulsory. So, dito naman sa Batas Pambansa bilang 232, ang nag-uutos sa gobyerno to promote the right of every individual to relevant quality education. Okay? Regardless of their sex, age, creed, socioeconomic status, physical and mental conditions, racial or ethnic origin, political or other affiliation, the state shall therefore promote and maintain equality of access to education as well as the enjoyment of the benefits of education by all its citizens. It further provides that the state recognizes its responsibility to provide within the context of the formal education system services to meet the special needs of certain clientele. So we can see from its provisions and we can see from each law and commitment that has been cited a while ago that there is a portion for special needs of learners, no? Talagang nabibigyan ng emphasis, no? Meron at merong lugar para sa mga learners with disabilities or special needs or exceptional learners. Now let's move to Presidential Decree number 603 or the Child and Youth Welfare Code of 1974. This is the right to education and the right to non-discrimination. This is the embodiment of this presidential decree. The right of children to an education commensurate with their abilities and for the development of their skills, for the improvement of their capacity for service to themselves and their fellow men. So, in relation to learners with disability, they have the right to education and the right to non-discrimination. And according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1989, Philippines is one of the countries that has signed the convention. It embodies a universal commitment to advance children's rights, including the rights of children with disabilities. The convention articulates the right of children more comprehensively and provides a set of fundamental principles, including but not limited to non-discrimination, which fundamentally shape the way children must be viewed and treated. The convention provides for the right of the child to education without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents' legal guardians' race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin, property, and, of course, we have the disability. Specific to children with disabilities, there is a specific section for children with disabilities. The Convention on the Rights of the Child obligates state parties, which includes the Philippines, to take all necessary measures to ensure the full enjoyment by children with disabilities of all human rights and fundamental freedom on the equal basis with other children. That's why in the first law a while ago, in the first declaration under the Magna Carta for person with disabilities, it emphasizes that PWDs must be treated as part of the society. Hence, therefore, enjoy all the rights, all the human rights and fundamental freedom, just like with other children. And for this specific law, we have RA 11510, or the Alternative Learning System Act. Alternative Learning System Act, enacted on December 23, 2020. Design specialized programs for learners with disabilities. So, ang ALS ngayon ay hindi na lamang para doon sa mga may edad na gustong mag-aral. Ito rin ngayon ay nagde-design sila ng program sa mga mag-aaral na may disability na gusto pa ring mag-aral. Taking into consideration the different levels of learning needs and other functional difficulties in the development of instructional materials and learning resources in accessible format. Of course, in kagaya ng in-stipulate sa mga batas na um, the provisions of programs, educational programs for learners with disability must consider their special needs, special requirement. No, the provision of um, special requirement considering their needs. So therefore, in ALS, educational program must consider their learning needs, and second, their ability to function, their difficulties in functioning, so that must likewise be considered. And the instructional materials to be used in teaching them must likewise be accessible for them. And the Batas Pambansa 344, or the Accessibility Law, focuses on enhancing the mobility of persons with disabilities by requiring certain buildings, institutions, establishment, and other public utilities to install access facilities and other devices, such as ramps, railings, tactile flooring, bathroom for persons with disabilities. So, ang Batas Pambansa 344, or Accessibility Law, required, no, the mobility, no, they enhance the mobility of person with disabilities, and in effect, all the infrastructures like buildings, the the buildings and other institution and establishment must install this type of facilities that would make the people or person with disability to access these places, no. An example of this is the ramp, no. Nakakakita tayo ng rampa, yung makinis na pataas. Okay, hindi hagdan. Sa able person ay hagdan, pero sa person with disability, ang kailangan nila ay ramp, no? Dahil sila ay most likely naka-wheelchair. Dapat meron ding railings o yung gabay, no? Dapat may mga gabay na pwedeng hawakan. Wag lang basta't hagdan na may baitang at walang gabay. And then dapat may tactile flooring. We can see this in the airport, no? Wherein we can ride in the tactile, not elevator type, pero ano siya, para siyang flooring lang, pero umaandar. No, makakarating ka sa isang destination mo without moving your feet, without actually stepping, no, or taking steps in order to transfer from one place to another. That is the tactile flooring. And bathroom for persons with disability, of course, ito yung tipo ng bathroom na nakakagalaw sila ng maayos. Medyo maluwang yung bathroom for persons with disability, and there is special features there na they can place where they can set their wheelchair, may mga railings, may mga gabay. Makikita mo talaga na ito ay pang person with disability. So, yung Batas Pambansa 344 ang may mandate noon. Ano? Dahil ang ine-enhance niya ay accessibility of PWDs. And we have the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disability, or the UNCRPD. The UNCRPD obligates state parties, including the Philippines, to undertake to ensure and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all PWDs without discrimination of any kind on the basis of disability. The state should adopt measures to implement the rights recognized in the CPRD, to consider protection and promotion of human rights of persons with disability in all policies and programs. So, ang UNCRPD ay nag-oobliga, no, sa mga bansa na patuloy na i-promote ang human rights at fundamental freedom ng mga taong may kapansanan, na, at wala dapat discrimination on the basis of the disability. And para maipakita ang patuloy na pagprotekta sa kanila ay policies and programs in the government should consider protection and promotion of human rights of PWDs. In the realm of education specifically, the CRPD imposes the duty upon the state to recognize the right of persons with disabilities to education. So, bawal na bawal sa education sector na tumanggi sa estudyanteng may kapansanan. No? Bawal na bawal dahil nasa batas na they must not be discriminate, no? In any type, no? On the basis of their disability. Kaya makikita natin na may mga nag-aaral na may kapansanan, tinatanggap sila basta't qualified sila, not in physical aspect, but let's say they are qualified without considering their disabilities, no? They will be treated as equal, just like any other applicant or student, no, in the school or in the university, with a view to realizing this right without discrimination and based on equal opportunity. State parties shall thus ensure an inclusive education system at all levels and lifelong learning, directed to the full development of human potentials and sense of dignity and self-worth, and strengthening of respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, and human diversity. And the next is the development by persons with disabilities of their personality, talents, and creativity, as well as their mental and physical abilities to the fullest potential, and enabling persons with disabilities to participate effectively in a free society. So we can see that in the realm of education, no, the CRPD imposes the duty upon state parties to recognize the right of persons with disability in education. So, bawal pong tumanggi sa mga mag-aaral na may disability. Okay? And another, the state parties of the CRPD, which includes the Philippines, have the duty to, among others, ensure that persons with disability are not excluded from the general education system on the basis of disability. So when we say general education system, this is the basic education system. We have the kindergarten, elementary, secondary, tertiary, and post-tertiary. Okay? Persons with disabilities can access an inclusive, quality, and free primary education and secondary education on an equal basis with others in the communities in which they live. Reasonable accommodation of the individual's requirement is provided. So, the persons with disability receive the support required within the general education system to facilitate their effective education. And effective individualized support measures are provided in environments that maximize academic and social development, consistent with the goal of full inclusion. Okay, in short, the Philippines have the duty to ensure that PWDs are not excluded in the general education system on the basis of their disability. And the CRPD obligates the state party or the Philippines as well, because Philippines is one of the state parties, to ensure facilitating the learning of sign language and promotion of the linguistic identity of the deaf community, and ensuring that the education of persons, and in particular children who are blind, deaf, or deaf-blind, is delivered in the most appropriate languages and modes and means of communication for the individual, and in environment which maximize academic and social development. So, SPED teacher must learn how to must learn the use of sign language to be able to cater to deaf community, yung mga may disabilities sa pandinig, o yung mga bulag, meron pa ring bulag na tapos hindi pa rin nakakarinig, ano? Meron silang specific linguistic identity. Kumbaga, kung ito ay hindi bulag at hindi lang nakakarinig, pwede yung sign language. Pero kung ito ay hindi na nakakarinig, hindi pa nakakakita, iba yung pamamaraan ng communication nila. And sometimes, gumagamit dito ang teacher ng braille system yata ang tawag doon, yung ginagamit nila yung sense of touch, no? Para makipag-communicate. May mga nakakabasa sila sa pamamagitan ng paghipo doon sa mga babasahin na may corresponding na embossed part ang bawat titik. No, that is for the blind learners. And we have the Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Ang provision ng SDG 4 ay provision of inclusive and equitable education and the promotion of lifelong learning opportunities. Goal number 4 strongly supports the reduction of persistent disparities in education. So, yung persistent na meron talagang hindi pagkakapareho, no? So, kailangan lahat ay nakaka-access, no? Walang naiiwan, nakaka-access sa ating edukasyon. At dapat ay, kaya nga sinabing it must be inclusive, no? And it must be equitable, no? Equal access to education and inclusivity. Lahat ng mag-aaral sa iba't ibang konteksto, kagaya ng binanggit ko kanina, Muslim learners, ethnic learners, learners na nakatira sa may armed conflict, tas learners in streets, no? Out of school learners. So, all of this is included in the inclusive education. And the goal number 4 is reduction of persistent disparities in education. And we have Incheon strategy. It looks into the expansion of early intervention and education of children with special educational needs. So, dapat ang ine-emphasize dito yung early intervention, no? At yung maagang pagbibigay ng intervention sa mga special learners, no? It stresses the government that which has the essential responsibility to ensure the learners with special educational needs get access to quality primary and secondary education on an equitable basis with others and in communities where they live. So, dito dapat yung batang may disability ay doon siya makakapag-aral sa pinakamalapit na paaralan at dapat nakaka-join o nakaka-access siya ng mula primary hanggang secondary level of education sa kanilang komunidad. And then we have the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health of the World Health Organization. This provides the lens through which disability and special educational needs can be better understood. It emphasizes that disability is created when the interaction between the environment and the unique condition of learners is poor. Okay? So, nagbibigay naman itong institution na ito or a certain organization na to ng malalim na pagkaunawa hinggil sa disability. At ang sabi nila, ang kapansanan ng isang tao ay mas nagkakaroon ng negatibong impact sa isang taong may kapansanan kung ang interaction niya sa kanyang kapaligiran ay hindi ganon kaganda at ang dahilan ay ang kanyang kapansanan. Kaya nga, dapat ang taong may kapansanan ay hindi itinitreat na kakaiba or poorly treated because of his condition. Kasi lalo lang na ma-magnify o lalo lang nagiging mas malalim yung epekto ng pagkakaroon niya ng disability. Kaya according to this, it is important to address the environmental factors that may hinder learners with disabilities from being a functional learners without disabilities. By providing quality and equitable support mechanism and accommodations for the unique condition, LWDs do not have to experience discrimination, especially in their homes, schools, and communities. So, para masuportahan ng komunidad ang mga taong may kapansanan, they should not be discriminated, especially in their homes, in the schools, and in the community. Now, let us look once again about the Magna Carta. I made a separate slide for this dahil ito yung sa tingin ko talaga na may pinaka-impactful o talagang may malaking impluwensya, no, sa kung paano pinoprotektahan ang mga taong may kapansanan. Unang-una, ang sabi rito, the Magna Carta emphasized that PWDs have the same rights as other people and their rights must never be perceived as welfare services. So, dahil sila ay itinuturing na kahalintulad ng ordinaryong tao sa Philippine society, hindi dapat natin isipin na ang kanilang ginagawang kalayaan ay dahil tulong yun sa kanila, no? Because it is a welfare services. No, because they are actually Filipino citizen. They are part of the Philippine society. So therefore, they have the equal access to education. So people must look at it as they are as well practicing their rights. Like in a school setting, merong mga eskwelahan na pang mga mag-aaral na walang kapansanan at meron ding eskwelahan na para sa mag-aaral na may kapansanan. Pareho silang may rights to quality education, accessible to education. Let us look at that way. Do not look at it as meron silang sariling eskwelahan kasi yun ay welfare services sa kanila kasi sila ay kawawa. Okay? The Magna Carta is still trying to protect the dignity of the PWDs. Provides the PWDs their rights to accessible quality education and opportunities to develop their skills, and the state must ensure this right. So, ang Magna Carta din yung nag-uutos sa state o sa gobyerno na PWDs must have equal access to education to develop their skills, and the state must ensure that this right is being practiced and implemented. The Magna Carta demands that the special requirements of PWDs be considered. So every time the government agencies would like to formulate educational policies, the consideration for PWDs special condition should be looked into, no? Should be considered as well. The Magna Carta makes it the duty of the state to provide auxiliary services to PWDs. So the provision of other settings or setup to facilitate learning for the PWDs is the duty of the state, no? Aside from the classroom learning, no? In school setting learning, auxiliary services could be community-based learning, home-based learning, hospital-based learning, and school-based learning. Makes the state to perform the duty of establishing, maintaining, and support complete integrated system of special education. Okay, so the Magna Carta as well makes the state, no, inuutusan niya ang gobyerno na to perform, no, the duty, no, to establish, so sa paglikha, sa pag-maintain at sa pag-suporta sa kumpletong system of special education. So when we say integrated, it composed of let's say elementary integrated school. Dapat merong grade 1 to grade 6 diyan, kahit na iilang piraso lang yung estudyante. Okay? Pwede rin nilang isama na pati high school, no? Kahit iilan lang ang estudyante. And this integrated system of special education should be intended for PWDs who are visually impaired, hearing impaired, mentally retarded person, and other types of exceptional children. And DepEd shall establish special education classes in public schools. That's why in every cities or municipalities, merong special education class or SPED class, no? And if viable, kung kakayanin, the Braille and record libraries in the province and municipalities is being tasked to the DepEd. So dito sa inyong mga bayan or sa inyong cities, municipalities, meron talagang itinatalaga ang Department of Education for SPED classes, no, in public schools. That is according to Magna Carta for persons with disability. And another, The Magna Carta obligates the national government to allocate funds. Nagbibigay sila dapat, inuobliga nito na magbigay ang gobyerno, no, ng pondo para sa implementation ng SPED program. At ito ay tatapatan ng bawat LGU kung saang city or municipality, no, to supplement the national funds. That is according to Magna Carta Section 14. And Magna Carta makes it the duty of the state to provide PWDs training in civics, vocational efficiency, sports, physical fitness, and other skills, and to develop non-formal education program. Yun din, Magna Carta rin ang nagsasabi na ang gobyerno ay may duty o responsibilidad na magsagawa o magbigay ng mga training para sa mga PWDs. Turuan sila ng mga vocational skills, i-engage sila sa sports, kaya nakikita natin parang merong mga sports fest para sa PWDs at ma-engage sa mga non-formal education program para sa kanilang self-development, for their lifelong learning, and to compete with the opportunities in the society. And the Magna Carta as amended by RA 10754 provides that educational assistance be granted to PWDs. So, ang Magna Carta rin ang nagsabi, no, na bigyan ng educational assistance ang mga PWDs na mag-aaral, gustong mag-aral, mula kindergarten, elementary, secondary, tertiary, post-tertiary, o vocational or technical education sa private at public schools sa pamamagitan ng mga scholarships, grants, financial aid, subsidies, at iba pang tulong pinansyal para sa kanila. Kaya makikita natin sa kagustuhan ng gobyerno na mapaunlad ang pamumuhay ng mga taong may kapansanan. And through the effect of Magna Carta, no, these PWDs will receive educational assistance for them to finish their studies and to become a productive citizen. And that ends our discussion for today. All the laws and commitments cited here can be found in the DepEd Order number 44 series of 2021 and also in this link, no. The next discussion or the next lesson will be the coverage of this DepEd order. Thank you for listening.